You ever feel completely invisible to someone you love? That's how I felt on my 70th birthday. My own daughter didn't even bother to show up. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, she texted me, asking for $3,200. I sent $2, and what happened next completely changed everything. My name is Margaret. I'm 70 years old. I've raised 2 children on my own since my husband passed, worked hard, and never asked for much. I've always believed family comes first. But that night, my so-called family showed me just how little they truly cared. I had planned a small birthday gathering with close friends, some neighbors, and my heart was really set on celebrating. I spent days preparing. My kitchen smelled like roasted chicken and baked apple pie, candles lined the living room, and I even bought a little vase of fresh tulips because I wanted it to feel special. The house was spotless, every cushion fluffed, every surface gleaming. I had even put on my favorite blue dress, the one I saved for special occasions, hoping to look my best. The anticipation built up inside me like a child on Christmas Eve, a hopeful flutter in my chest. I imagined the laughter, the shared memories, the warmth of connection. I even baked a small 2-layer chocolate cake, her favorite, with cream cheese frosting. It was a recipe passed down from my own mother, one my daughter used to beg for when she was a little girl. I imagined her walking through the door, a big smile on her face, maybe a small bouquet of flowers for me, or even a handmade card. We'd sit, we'd talk, we'd laugh just like old times, before life got complicated and before she grew so distant. I had even picked out some old photo albums, thinking we could reminisce about her childhood, about happier days when she would snuggle close and tell me everything. My heart ached with the desire for that connection, that simple acknowledgement of my existence and my milestone. It felt like such a small thing to ask for, after all the years I had poured into her. But as the evening wore on, the sun dipping below the horizon and painting the sky in hues of purple and deep orange, it became painfully clear. My daughter wasn't coming. And she didn't even call to say why. The candles I had carefully lit burned down, casting long, flickering shadows on the walls. The delicious food I had spent hours preparing grew cold, uneaten, sitting forlornly on the dining room table. The silence in the house became deafening. Each tick of the grandfather clock in the hall seemed to echo her absence, a stark, painful reminder of the empty chair at the table. My friends and neighbors, bless their hearts, tried to make light of it, offered their condolences with soft words and gentle touches, but I could see the pity in their eyes. They knew, and I knew, that this was more than just a missed appointment, more than a simple oversight. It was a statement. It was a deliberate choice. I felt a cold knot of disappointment tighten in my stomach, a familiar ache that had been growing over the years, steadily, almost imperceptibly, until it had become a constant companion. It was a sense of being forgotten, of not mattering enough to warrant even a brief phone call. At first, I tried to convince myself she was busy. Maybe her husband was sick, maybe something urgent came up at work, maybe she was genuinely caught up in something unavoidable. She always had an excuse, a perfectly reasonable explanation for why she couldn't make it to family gatherings, to my doctor's appointments, to any event that required her time and effort. I told myself to be understanding, to be patient, to give her the benefit of the doubt. That's what mothers do, right? We make excuses for our children, even when they consistently let us down, even when the pattern becomes glaringly obvious. I pictured her rushing around, perhaps stuck in traffic, or dealing with some unforeseen emergency that demanded all her attention. I wanted to believe it, I really did, because the alternative was too painful to fully acknowledge. I kept checking my phone every few minutes, hoping for a call, a text, anything to explain her absence, anything to alleviate the crushing weight of loneliness. My hope dwindled with each passing minute, replaced by a growing sense of dread and sadness, a feeling of being utterly alone on a day that was supposed to be special. But then, around 9 o'clock, long after my friends had left and I was sitting alone in the quiet, candlelit living room, my phone buzzed. A text message. My heart gave a little hopeful leap, a foolish flicker of optimism. Finally, an explanation. A belated happy birthday, perhaps, an apology for missing my special day, a promise to make it up to me. No. The screen lit up with a curt, impersonal message. Mom, I need $3,200 for my mother-in-law's 70th birthday. I stared at the message for a long, long time, the words blurring before my eyes as a wave of emotions washed over me. My own daughter ignored my 70th birthday, didn't even send a happy birthday text, didn't even bother to call, and now she's asking me for thousands of dollars as if I were some kind of automated teller machine. My mind was racing, a whirlwind of anger, frustration, and deeply wounded pride. I felt anger, a sharp, hot wave of it that rushed through me, making my ears ring. Then disappointment, a heavy, sinking feeling in my chest that stole my breath, and honestly, a little bit of disbelief. It was so brazen, so utterly lacking in self-awareness, so completely devoid of any consideration for my feelings, that it almost felt unreal, like a bad dream I couldn't wake from. I read the message again, slower this time, as if scrutinizing each word would somehow change its meaning. Mom, I need $3,200 for my mother-in-law's 70th birthday. The audacity of it. Her mother-in-law's 70th birthday, not mine. She couldn't spare a moment for her own mother's milestone, a woman who had given her life and countless sacrifices, but she expected me to fund a lavish gift for someone else's mother-in-law, a woman who had no biological connection to me whatsoever. It was a stark contrast, a glaring spotlight on where her priorities lay, revealing a disturbing truth about her perception of our relationship. I had raised her, I had nurtured her, I had guided her through every stage of her life. I had taught her about kindness, about respect, about responsibility, about the importance of family and gratitude. I had sacrificed so much for her, worked extra shifts, gone without new clothes or even proper meals so she could have what she needed, and often what she wanted. And this felt like a betrayal of the deepest kind, a brutal slap to my face, invalidating every effort I had ever made for her. Every late night spent worrying, every penny I had ever spent on her education, her clothes, her dreams, flashed through my mind, each memory adding another layer to the wound. I could feel my blood pressure rising, a pulsing in my temples that mirrored the thumping in my chest. My hands trembled just slightly, clutching my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. My breath hitched in my throat, a lump forming that made it impossible to swallow. I wanted to scream, to cry, to lash out with all the pain she had inflicted. But then, in the midst of that storm of emotion, a strange calm came over me. Not a peaceful calm, not a sense of acceptance, but a cold, steely quietness that settled deep in my bones. That calm that only comes when you reach a breaking point, when you realize that enough is finally, irrevocably enough. That calm that settles in when you know, with absolute certainty, exactly what you're going to do. It was a clarity born of years of neglect, of countless little cuts that had slowly, painstakingly bled me dry, leaving nothing but a hardened resolve. I didn't reply immediately. I couldn't. I needed a moment to process, to let the initial shock and anger subside into something more constructive, something that wouldn't be impulsive or regrettable. I got up from the armchair, walked to the kitchen, and automatically went through the ritual I often used to ground myself, pouring a cup of chamomile tea. My hands were still shaking slightly as I filled the kettle, the water sloshing precariously. The familiar scent of the tea, usually so comforting, barely registered, overshadowed by the intense focus of my new resolve. I carried the warm mug back to the window and sat down in my favorite armchair, looking out at the street. The neighbors were quietly chatting as they came home from work, their porch lights casting warm glows onto the darkening pavement. The sky was painted in the deep oranges and pinks of sunset, a beautiful, tranquil scene that sharply contrasted with the turmoil raging inside me, a quiet beauty that seemed almost mocking in its serenity. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to simply breathe, to simply exist in the quiet hum of the evening, letting the raw emotions wash over me and then, slowly, deliberately, recede, making way for a cold, hard plan. I thought back to all the times she had disregarded me. The holidays I had spent alone, year after year, because she claimed to be busy with her husband's family or her own friends, never bothering to invite me along. The little things she ignored, my calls, my voicemails that often went unreturned for days, my suggestions for getting together for a simple lunch or coffee. The birthdays she had skipped in the past, always with a vague excuse about work or travel, but never an actual apology or a rescheduled visit, never a genuine attempt to make amends. It wasn't just the money she was asking for now. It was the principle of it all. It was the deeply ingrained pattern, the consistent message that I was an afterthought, a convenient resource to be tapped when she needed something, but never a priority, never a person whose feelings or needs mattered. It was the complete lack of respect, the casual dismissal of my feelings and my very existence. It felt like she saw me as nothing more than an ATM with a pulse, a source of endless funds, not a mother who had given her everything, her heart and soul. I decided then that I wasn't going to respond with anger, yelling, or even a lecture. Those never worked. They just led to arguments, to her shutting down, to me feeling even more frustrated and unheard, the same old cycle repeating itself endlessly. No, I was going to respond with something far more effective, something quiet, cold, and decisively impactful. Something that would speak volumes without me having to utter a single word. Something that would cut through her entitlement more sharply than any verbal reprimand. I picked up my phone again. My thumb hovered over the keyboard for a moment, the screen reflecting my determined face. Then, with a deep, steady breath, I typed out a reply. My fingers moved with a new certainty. $2, congrats. I didn't write anything else. No explanation, no apology, no pleading, no questions, no attempt to engage in a conversation. Just $2 and one simple word. Congrats! I even added the period for good measure, a finality to the message, an unambiguous end to the interaction. I knew it would sting, that it would leave her confused, probably infuriated, and perhaps even bewildered. And honestly, a part of me, a small, bruised part, relished that thought. I was tired of being the perpetually understanding, endlessly forgiving mother. After I sent it, I felt a small spark of satisfaction, a flicker of empowerment that warmed me from the inside out. But the work wasn't done. Not by a long shot. This was just the beginning. You see, my daughter had always assumed she had access to everything: my house, my financial accounts, my property. She had grown up thinking I would always be there to bail her out, to pick up after her mistakes, to provide a safety net no matter how high she jumped or how far she fell. That deep-seated assumption, that ingrained entitlement, that unquestioning belief that my resources were her resources, was about to be shattered completely. I walked over to my desk, the old mahogany one that had been my husband's, a sturdy, dark piece of furniture that had seen countless family budgets and important decisions. I opened the bottom drawer, the one that had been sitting there, mostly untouched for months, filled with important documents. Legal papers, property deeds, bank account statements, my last will and testament, all neatly organized, waiting for this very day. Everything she thought she had control over, or at least a guaranteed claim to, I had quietly been preparing for years to reclaim, if and when it became necessary. I had always hoped it wouldn't come to this, that she would eventually mature, that she would see the value of our relationship beyond what she could get from me. But that hope had slowly withered and died, replaced by a pragmatism born of repeated disappointment. I found the contact information for the local locksmith, a small business card tucked into my address book. It was late, past 10 o'clock, but I knew some locksmiths offered emergency services for situations like mine. I called and, keeping my voice calm and firm, explained that I needed new locks on all my doors, and quickly. I didn't give many details, just that it was urgent and a matter of personal security. Within an hour, a kind, quiet man arrived, dressed in overalls, his toolkit clanking softly. He worked efficiently, replacing every lock cylinder, every deadbolt on my front door, back door, and even the side entrance. He even gave me a new, secure code for the garage door opener. The old keys, the ones I had given my daughter years ago when she was still living at home, were now utterly useless, incapable of granting entry. She would not be able to enter my house again. Not that she had even been truly welcome here for a long, long time. The satisfying click of the new locks engaging felt like a physical barrier, a strong, unyielding shield going up around me and my home. It was a tangible act of reclaiming my space, my privacy, my peace of mind. The next morning, I woke up feeling surprisingly refreshed, despite the emotional turmoil and late night of the previous day. There was a lightness in my step, a sense of purpose and clarity that had been missing for years, replaced by nagging doubts and anxieties. I had a clear path forward, and I wasn't going to deviate from it, not for anyone. The fog of indecision had finally lifted. I went through my will one last time, seated at my husband's desk, the morning sun streaming through the window. I had already made significant changes over the past year, quietly reallocating assets and making provisions for my son and other family members who genuinely cared. Now, I finalized them with a steady hand. I removed her name entirely from certain inheritances, redirecting significant funds to several charities I cared deeply about, a local animal shelter, a foundation for elderly care, and a scholarship fund for underprivileged students. I also increased the inheritance for my son, who, despite his own flaws and occasional struggles, had always shown me a basic level of respect and genuine affection. Items she assumed she would automatically inherit: the antique brooch from my grandmother, a cherished family heirloom, the small cottage by the lake that had been in our family for generations. Certain investment accounts she had always eyed, she would no longer have access to. All assets were legally transferred, all in my name, all carefully worded to be legally binding and utterly ironclad. I made sure there were no ambiguities, no loopholes she could exploit, no technicalities that could be challenged. I had learned from watching her navigate similar situations with other family members and even her own friends. She was cunning and relentless when it came to money. By noon, I had made the calls to my attorney, Mr. Davies, a calm and methodical man who had handled my affairs for decades, to confirm that everything was in place. We went over every detail, every clause, every transfer. He assured me it was all airtight, legally sound, and fully executed. Every penny, every property title, every small detail regarding my estate was now beyond her reach. She would not even be able to claim it through any loophole, any legal challenge, any emotional appeal. It was done. It was truly, irrevocably done. The sense of finality was profound, like closing a very long, difficult chapter. Meanwhile, my daughter's texts started coming in, a relentless flurry of them, completely unaware that the tides had already turned, that the game was already over. "Mom, why did you only send $2? I really need this money for a special gift. It's for Grandma Susan. Please, just this once, it's for my husband's mother. Are you mad at me? What did I do?" The tone shifted rapidly from entitled demanding to whiny pleading, then to thinly veiled accusation, a classic emotional manipulation tactic. She had no idea the earthquake she had just caused beneath her feet. I ignored them all. I watched the messages pop up on my screen, read them without emotion, each one a testament to her self-absorption, and then, without a second thought, deleted them without replying. She didn't know that she had already lost everything she valued in terms of financial access to me, everything she had taken for granted. And honestly, I didn't feel a single thing for her panic, for her growing desperation. No pity, no guilt, no second thoughts, no remorse. Just a profound, almost serene calm. I felt empowered. It was a liberation, a shedding of a heavy burden I had carried for far too long, a weight that had been slowly crushing my spirit. That afternoon, I sat back in my favorite armchair by the window, the sun now high in the sky, sipping my tea again. This time, the chamomile actually tasted soothing, its warmth a comfort. I gazed out at my perfectly manicured garden, at the flowers I had planted myself, and reflected. I thought about how life can sometimes be cruel, how people can disappoint you in the most unexpected and painful ways, but it also has a way of serving justice in the quietest, most unexpected ways. It's not about vengeance in the violent sense, or about inflicting pain. It's about restoring balance, about protecting yourself when others refuse to respect your boundaries, when they repeatedly take advantage of your generosity. It was about recognizing my own worth, something I had allowed her to diminish for too long, letting her walk all over my feelings and my generosity. 2 days later, there was a loud, insistent knock at my door. Not a gentle rap, but a series of sharp, demanding thumps that reverberated through the quiet house, announcing their aggressive presence. My heart skipped a beat, but not from fear or apprehension. It was from a strange, exhilarating anticipation, a knowing certainty that this was the moment. I knew exactly who it was. The moment of truth, the final act of this quiet drama. I walked to the door, took a deep breath, and opened it with a steady hand. There she stood, my daughter. Her face was flushed crimson, her eyes blazing with a furious mixture of shock and incandescent anger. Beside her was her husband, looking incredibly uncomfortable and slightly embarrassed, shuffling his feet. And behind them, 2 uniformed police officers, standing with an air of official authority. My daughter immediately launched into a tirade, her voice high-pitched and shrill, barely controlled. "Mom, why did you change the locks? We couldn't get in. What is going on? And where is the money you owe me?" She pointed dramatically to the officers. "I told them there was a dispute over property. They need to make you give me access to my childhood home." She claimed that someone had reported a dispute regarding the property, likely her, trying to force her way in, framing it as a family conflict to involve the law. My daughter looked at me with wide eyes, a mix of shock and anger that she couldn't hide, believing she had the upper hand by bringing the authorities, that their presence would intimidate me. She had assumed that she could manipulate the situation, just like she always had, by involving an outside party to pressure me, to make me bend to her will. She truly believed I would fold under the official presence, that I would cave and give her what she wanted, just like every other time she had pulled a similar stunt. I simply smiled, calm, quiet. My voice was steady, even betraying no hint of the turmoil that had once raged within me. "Officers," I said, addressing them directly, maintaining eye contact, "there is no dispute here. This is my private property, solely in my name. I've changed the locks for my own security, which I am perfectly entitled to do as the homeowner. And my daughter here has no legal right to access this property, nor does she reside here, nor has she contributed to its upkeep in any way." The officers, professional and composed, asked to see proof of ownership, as was their duty. I calmly stepped back, pulled out the deeds, the updated will, and the property documents I had carefully prepared, all neatly organized in a folder. They reviewed everything carefully, my name as the sole owner, the dates of the lock change, even a recent police report I had filed about repeated unwanted attempts to gain access to my property by her, outlining a pattern of harassment. It was all there, clear as day, undeniable. They asked me a few questions, which I answered truthfully and directly, without embellishment or emotion. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, then with a devastating clarity, her face fell. The bravado, the confidence, the sheer, unshakable entitlement she had grown up with, melted away in front of me as the officers nodded, satisfied with my documentation, their expressions turning from neutral to sympathetic towards me. All of the assumed power, all of the control she thought she had over me and my resources, crumbled into dust. For the very first time, she realized she had been outmaneuvered, not through an emotional argument or a frantic pleading, but through quiet, methodical, and entirely legal preparation. I had played no games, told no lies, fabricated no stories, and yet, she had lost everything she thought she had a right to, everything she had been so certain was hers. Her husband, looking mortified, kept his eyes glued to the ground, clearly wanting to disappear into thin air. The officers, seeing no crime or legal dispute, and having verified my sole ownership and right to deny access, advised my daughter that she had no legal right to my property and that attempting to force entry would be considered trespassing, a criminal offense. They delivered the news firmly but politely. They left shortly after, their departure leaving an echoing silence. She stood there for a long moment, utterly defeated, the anger slowly draining from her face, replaced by a dawning, terrible horror. She turned to me, her voice trembling, demanding explanations, her eyes wide with a desperate plea for understanding that was, ironically, too late. "Mom, how could you? What about my inheritance? What about my share? This is my family home." I simply looked her in the eye. My voice was quiet, calm, but it carried an undeniable weight, a finality that brooked no argument. "I sent $2, I said, letting the words hang in the air, "because that's all you deserved for treating your own mother as an ATM while ignoring her entirely on her 70th birthday." And in that moment, as the full realization truly hit her, as the magnitude of her actions and my perfectly calibrated response finally sank in, she understood. Every privilege revoked, every assumed right denied, every bridge burned, all because of her own choices. The silence that followed was the loudest statement of all, a stark monument to the end of an era. I closed the door behind her, the solid thud echoing through the quiet house, a sound of closure and finality. And I felt lighter than I had in years, truly unburdened. 70 years of life, 70 years of patience, 70 years of lessons learned, some the very hard way, and finally, justice. Quiet, complete, and utterly undeniable. It wasn't a triumphant, gloating feeling, no childish satisfaction. It was a deep, settled peace, a profound sense of having finally taken control of my own narrative, of my own life. I realized something profoundly important that day. Revenge doesn't have to be loud, it doesn't have to be cruel, it doesn't have to involve shouting matches or public humiliation or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes, the most satisfying revenge is the one that's planned meticulously, patiently, and executed perfectly in silence, with calm precision. the kind that teaches the lesson without ever raising your voice, without ever lowering yourself to their level of disrespect or manipulation. It's about setting clear, unyielding boundaries, about protecting your peace of mind, and about reclaiming your dignity and self-worth when others have trampled all over them. It's about choosing yourself, finally. I spent the rest of my week celebrating in genuine peace. My friends came over, and this time, the house was filled with real warmth, heartfelt laughter, and sincere companionship. We shared stories, we ate good food, and we toasted to life, to enduring friendship, to resilience, and to the quiet strength that comes with age. I realized I didn't need anyone's approval or even their constant physical presence to feel valued. I had my dignity. I had control over my life, my home, my finances, and most importantly, my own sense of self. And that was truly priceless. It was a profound sense of self-worth that no amount of money or attention from others, especially from those who didn't truly care, could ever buy. I reconnected with hobbies I had let slip away: painting, gardening, reading, spent quiet, fulfilling time in my garden, nurturing the plants, and enjoyed the simple, undisturbed quiet of my home. My daughter never came back. She stopped texting. She stopped calling. The silence, which once would have pierced me with loneliness, wasn't painful anymore. It was liberating. It was the sound of peace. I had learned a crucial lesson myself. Sometimes the ones we love the most are capable of hurting us the deepest, not always out of malice, but often out of a profound, blinding self-centeredness and entitlement. But we also have the inherent power to protect ourselves, to reclaim our lives, to redefine our relationships, and to ensure that justice is served, even quietly. It taught me that sometimes, letting go of what you thought you had and embracing what truly is the strongest act of love for yourself. And the best part? I did it all without losing a shred of my integrity. No yelling, no public humiliation, no emotional drama, no lowering myself to her level of petty manipulation. Just a simple, decisive action, born of years of patient observation and quiet resolve, that changed everything for the better. If you want to hear more stories where justice is served, watch the next video.